This is the recollection of a survivor of the 2004 tsunami in the Indian Ocean. His name is Louis Cryer, and he was 18 at the time and traveling in Sri Lanka with his mother and his brother. He writes, "We were staying in an idyllic beach village. It took a matter of seconds for a wall of water about 5 feet in height to start coming in. It was a kind of surge which reached the first floor of our hotel. It flattened walls, trees, and the buildings around us before rising higher and higher. We tried to get people out. Miraculously, guests who had been in the room underneath us started popping up from the water. One woman was trapped in her locked room because she couldn't find her key. She said the room filled up quickly with water and she took what she thought would be her last breath. Luckily, she found the key and opened the door, which then burst into pieces under the pressure. Buildings were collapsing around us. We tried to pull out passing people trapped in the currents. When the water finally subsided, we made a run for higher ground and a temple that had become a makeshift, safe refugee area. We set up camp in a hotel up on a hill, and when it was safe to do so, we went back down to salvage anything we could. I remember seeing rooms full of mud and fish." You can imagine the rest of the story, the wounded and injured people that he saw, and the endless destruction of property and livelihoods. I don't know about you, but I feel like this past year has hit us like a tsunami. The COVID-19 pandemic, deep conflicts around recognizing and addressing racism in our society, the general tension leading up to the presidential election, hurricanes, and now wildfires. I don't think it's a coincidence that the word in Hebrew for crisis, mashber, is a different form of the word for big waves, mishbar, mishbarim. This tsunami, of course, has affected each of us differently. Some of us have been able to keep our feet firmly planted in the sand, staying in shallow water and just observing the waves and their intensity. Others of us have been pulled under and had the wind knocked out of us, coming up gasping and sputtering, trying to reorient ourselves and looking at a beach full of the broken pieces of our lives. Some of us are treading water, having been pushed out far to sea, feeling abandoned and alienated from everything we know. And others of us have actually drowned. Like the tsunami, this has roared in upon us quickly. If we think back to last year at this time, last Rosh Hashanah, what a different world we live in now. And despite our fervent prayers for a vaccine to be ready, #Vizman Kariv, that it may come soon and in our day, our lives are never going to return to how they were before COVID-19. And so, we're called this Rosh Hashanah to examine what resources we have as individuals and as a community to survive this crisis, this wave, this mashber, and really any other challenge that we face that may not have been caused by COVID-19, but might be exacerbated by it. We all have access to these resources and may have even used them before, but sometimes we need to be reminded of them and how they apply at this particular moment. So tonight, I want to talk to you about cultivating the midah of hishtavut, the soul trait of equanimity. Tomorrow, about facing loneliness. Kol Nidre, about learning Torah. Yes, that is also one of our resources. And on Yom Kippur morning, about enhancing our capacity for empathy. So tonight, a Jewish value we don't talk about very much, equanimity, sometimes called hishtavut, from the root shaveh, which means equal, or menuchat hanefesh, a calm or restful spirit. We Jews are an emotional people, culturally loud and expressive, described from our very origins in the Torah as a people who argue with God and get angry at God, like Abraham and Job. We recite psalms that capture the depths of an emotional life of faith, of doubt, of fear, of anger, and of elation. We expect to cry and rip our clothing at a funeral, dance with joy and abandon at a wedding. We debate with one another, often with rancor, centuries ago in the Talmud and in every bit of Jewish literature since then, up through the publication of the Times of Israel this morning. So, to be clear, equanimity, hishtavut, is not about avoiding the full range of emotions. It's about learning to live with them. There is such a thing as being too calm, being oblivious and not responding to our own emotions or those of others. Hishtavut is also not about knowing all the answers or finding peace and enlightenment. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter taught, as long as one lives a life of calmness and tranquility in the service of God, it is clear that he is remote from true service. Instead, hishtavut is the skill of living with emotionality, insecurity, and spiritual struggles, but not being overcome by them. Dr. Alan Marinis, central teacher of the modern Musar movement, a teaching that emphasizes spiritual growth through the development of specific character traits, says, "The calm soul is centered and rides on an inner even keel, regardless of what is happening within and around you. I liken it to surfing. Even as the waves are rising and falling, the calm soul rides the crest, staying upright, balanced, and moving in the direction you choose, exquisitely sensitive to the forces that are at work all around." I like that image of the surfer, and I think the essential point that Dr. Marinis makes in this analogy is that one is sensitive to all the forces at play. You can't ignore them, or you fall off the surfboard. You have to work with them and through them to gain an accurate perspective. Our tradition has many ways of teaching us to do this. One that has become popular of late is Jewish mindfulness meditation, built on teachings as diverse as those of Maimonides and of later Hasidic Rebbes. There has been an explosion of resources in this arena since the pandemic, and I think it's a very powerful tool for some of us, and if you want more information, please be in touch with me. But I know it doesn't work for everyone. I think another resource that we have is easily accessible: observing Shabbat and praying. It's a pause from regular time that allows us to stop doing and just to be. We have a chance to examine our emotions, to reflect on them, to gain perspective on our own experiences, and to express gratitude wherever we can. I do think those tools suffice to help us maintain equanimity for many situations in our lives. But since surfing on a tsunami is not really possible, I want to look at additional teachings from our tradition. In the Talmud we read, Rabbi Gamliel said, "Once I was traveling on a boat, and from a distance I saw a boat that had shattered and sank. I was grieved over the apparent death of the Torah scholar who was on board. And who was it? Rabbi Akiva. But when I disembarked onto dry land, he came and sat and deliberated before me about halakha. I said to him, 'My son, who brought you up from the water?' He said to me, 'A plank from the boat came to me, and I bent my head before each and every wave that came toward me. The waves did not wash me off the plank, and I reached the shore.'" We survive the waves of the external hardships imposed upon us and the emotions that arise in us as a response to them by holding on to something we know will carry us through, that will buoy us up and bring us ashore, even while we bend our head to the waves. What is it in your life that gives you strength? Your family, your friends, your daily exercise, your spiritual practice, whatever it might be, even your cup of coffee in the morning. Early on in the pandemic, someone sent around on social media a list of survival skills for quarantine. In some ways, they seemed very silly to me. Suggestions such as, make sure you're dressed in regular clothes on your whole body, not just the parts that are visible on Zoom. But as we've progressed through the pandemic, I understand better now. Those little daily things that require our attention to help us establish a routine in a world of chaos, they can carry us through the waves. Turn your attention to them in detail, hold on to them, and let them keep you afloat. But there's a deeper level of this particular Talmud text, a double entendre. The word daf, as a plank from the boat, is also the word used to refer to a page of Talmud itself. It's Torah and tradition that carry us through. Prayer and Shabbat observance, the practice of ritual, and using the ethical mitzvot to remind us to help others and take care of ourselves, All of these are part of that daf. They are planks to hold on to bring us ashore. The Talmud text continues, Rabbi Akiva said, once I was traveling on a boat, and I saw a certain boat sinking at sea, and I was grieved over the apparent death of the Torah scholar who was on board. And who was it? Rabbi Meir. But when I disembarked at the province of Cappadocia, he came and sat and deliberated before me about halakha. I said to him, my son, who brought you up from the water? He said to me, one wave carried me to another, and that other to another wave, and another wave, until I reached the shore, and a wave cast me up onto the dry land. A little bit similar to the surfing analogy, but deeper, Rabbi Meir isn't standing up balanced, but swept away in the waves, hanging on the best he could and strategizing as to where to find his advantage, and knowing he was at the mercy of the forces of the ocean. He was forced to take a risk and to trust that the waves themselves would bring him ashore. Rabbi Meir's approach to the waves demonstrates a powerful Jewish wisdom, that we sometimes have no choice but to trust that the ocean, the source of life on the planet, will bring us ashore. It's expressed in this verse from Psalms that we recite as part of our Yizkor service, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, I place God in front of me always. Hishtavut, equanimity, shares the root with shiviti, equal to me, in front of me, present to me. And if the traditional concept of God is difficult for you, you might like to think about this verse with a more expansive interpretation. I find equanimity when I am in touch with the life force of the universe. This doesn't mean that everything in the life force of the universe is good, quite the opposite. Only that there is life force and that we are a part of it. Some mystical teachers say that to understand the relationship between God and an individual soul, it's useful to use the image of the ocean. Each of our souls are in fact a wave with a distinct life for a short amount of time, but then as we come ashore, our individuality dissolves back into the whole ocean, the energy of God that animates the universe. If we can know this truth, feel it in our kishkas, our insides, and remind ourselves of it regularly, we can find hishtavut. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid. I find equanimity when I know that I am part of the life force of this universe. On Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate this sacred life force, moving us forward another year, another chance for renewal, a chance for repair. We call attention to the beauty of this moment, even knowing how tenuous, and perhaps especially because we know how tenuous it is. And as we celebrate, though, we can also remind ourselves, life doesn't only contain tsunamis, it also contains soft, soothing waves and beautiful days at the beach. So tonight we pray, may this year bring us many more sunny days at the beach than last year, and a deep understanding that we can still find equanimity, even if it doesn't. L'shana tova and Shabbat Shalom.